I'm Tyler Epson, and this is what the fuck's on my mind. There are few things, besides running out of weed, I hate more in life than watching cartoons and movies I grew up with getting no touched by bullshit Hollywood remakes in a whack ass attempt to sell me back my childhood. Consistently, there's been no bigger nemesis of mine regarding this than the Transformers movie series, which, outside of being no more than a dolled up streetwalker for Paramount Studios, is essentially a milkshake made of eggnog, vomit, and regret. The story of the fight between the Autobots and the Decepticons is arguably the first IP I truly gravitated towards as a kid. Introduced to me in what used to be the American ritual that was the Saturday morning cartoon. Something me and every other degenerate I know from my generation participated in well into our late 20s. Getting up early in the morning to smoke blunts and eat leftover Kraft mac and cheese while watching Static Shock and the Jackie Chan adventures. Transformers has always been the victim of nostalgia glasses. The original fans were the ones that had the toys and watched the cartoons in the 80s. And just like revisiting the He-Man, G.I. Joe, and Thundercats cartoons, watching the Transformers show from back in the day as an adult kind of makes you realize how you also used to think the bra and panty section of your local department store catalog was quality jerk-off material. Since the debut of the classic series, the franchise has had many spin-offs, remakes, and retellings, all with various degrees of quality in terms of visual appeal and story from both American production companies and Japanese studios, as the OG toys were based off of a Japanese line that came out in the late 70s. And side note, all you weeboo douchebags that think everything animated out of Japan is light years ahead of any Western animated property needs to watch some of these shows from the land of the rising sun and then please eat a bowl of shut the fuck up. I will also say I am not an expert on the entire franchise as there are too many cartoons and comics. And the fact I was like 10 when the original show ended means I have too much to do with my time to have a comprehensive knowledge of this shit. That being said, I am too far away from being a noob to not put my 2 cents in, and even if I was, fuck yourself, I say what I want. For a long time since the initial series ended, Transformers has kind of waded in the shallow pool of B and C list cartoons that had enough of a fan base to generate some form of interest regularly without having to rethink the wheel, but obviously its best days were behind it. Nothing is bigger proof of this than the absolute dumpster inferno that is Beast Wars. That is until Michael Bay and the Hollywood powers realized, to quote a pimp named Iceberg Slim, there's still mileage on this hoe. As an old school fan of the show, I personally never felt a need for the Michael Bay films to ever come out. And after having watched all of them over the years, I can't really say I was wrong with my initial opinion. As a film series, Transformers is a trash omelet made of a brand recognition cash grab, shit overall storytelling, and elements disturbingly similar to past sci-fi blockbusters, all chefed up by the Jay-Z of overdone action films. These movies progress like an avalanche of sewer water filled with used syringes. And they hands down win the award for I stopped giving a fuck about this an hour ago with an hour and a half left to watch. If you've listened to my bullshit for longer than 30 seconds, I have a hard time believing any of my viewers know nothing about the Transformers story. But for you knuckle draggers that have not, it's a civil war involving morphing robot life forms, with humans being put in the middle of all this like two junkies fighting to death over a $20 bill. As a Saturday morning cartoon, this works because the target audience, with all due respect to the youth, generally have all the mental capacity of a bag of Doritos. As a blockbuster movie franchise that aims to get revenue from adults with usually limited funds, it's fucking clown shoes. And now with the release of the sixth film, Rise of the Beast, which I have no intention of ever watching, I now found a new reason for old man Tyler to drop a deuce on the feels of any of you jelly spine crybabies that would support this bullshit. In this essay I am calling Fuck You Transformers. I need to start by saying there is no way I can or will defend the entire franchise. It has been done by multiple production crews with obvious differences in their respective budgets, and even the ones I do like still have flaws, and some of them are just downright awful. But it seems the movies have the glaring ability to make you realize how shows that came out as 30-minute toy commercials are the last fucking thing any director would want to make a film series about. But that's only if you're more interested in putting out a good cinematic product as opposed to being able to rail any woman you wanted on a bed of cash while vaping liquid cocaine, which is what I would probably pick if given the choice. Kids shows take advantage of the fact that children tend to have a higher threshold of suspension of reality, which is what makes fiction work. And before you assholes try to jump down my throat because I've made videos about comic book shit and Star Wars, the thing that separates properties like that from shit like Thundercats or Power Rangers is the fact that those entities wove traditional storytelling, character development, and conflict into the fantastical nature of their premise. This is why the original Avatar: The Last Airbender stands head and shoulders above anything made for its target demographic. But Transformers is no Avatar. When the first season originally came out on DVD in the 2010s, I rushed out to buy it and binge watched it in about a day. And after watching it, I remember thinking I could have spent that money on cheeseburgers and cheap hookers. Now, there have been more recent Transformers shows I've seen that I thought were pretty good. Prime, Robots in Disguise, and even the animated series push story concepts that many fans that would still want to follow the series should check out. And they were able to come up with new robots and retellings of the original ones that were intriguing, even though if there were some stupid parts still. So while the IP as a whole is no home run, there's still enough there to do the concept justice. The Michael Bay films, however, are not in any way one of those parts. My biggest gripe about the movie franchise is it tends to make the story less about the Transformers themselves and more about the human beings they interact with. As bad as the original series can be in hindsight, and as disappointing as later iterations are, they at least make the Transformers the main character of the Transformers. Granted, the whole Autobot Decepticon war playing out on Earth was part of the original, but it gets to the point where at times it seems the films have very little to do with the Autobots. At best, they're secondary characters. At worst, they're glorified fucking props. And the fact that they're not the main focus they should be is part of the reason these films are so bloated as a whole. The fourth movie, Transformers don't show up for 15 minutes. That's a long damn time. And this movie is 2 hours and 45 minutes long. How is this the good, the bad, and the ugly length? And it's hard to watch beings that should have no reason to respect or even regard humans not only play second fiddle in films named after them, but seem to get pushed around at times. This is particularly egregious regarding the Decepticons and Megatron as their leader, who, as the movies progress, quickly get regulated to just being stooges for whatever real threat the film provides and are truly non-factors. Yes, it makes sense for the IP to go in a new direction, and exploring how the coexistence of an alien race such as the Transformers, with their polarized factions plays out on a planet full of technologically inferior humans is a cool way to take it, if somewhat unoriginal. But I think you start to step on your dick when all you can come up with plot-wise are hand-me-down ideas from shit like Men in Black, Terminator 2, and even Gremlins, mixed with the nerd bait of having an awkward male main character that gets to interact with a girl so hot she should be genetically programmed to find him repelling. But the awkward male character trope gets watered down because they're usually cast by guys that have already been on the cover of GQ. You can never make the argument that as a whole, Transformers has ever been the epitome of storytelling. But I have to say the overall feel of the movies is the definition of flash in the pan. All sizzle, no steak. And a large part of it is the overall design of the Transformers. Most notably the Decepticons, and there is no fucking way I'm the only person that's ever bitched about this. The generic depiction of the Destructicons has been done in previous shows, but the movies turned this into an abortion sundae with a cherry made of syphilis on top, especially regarding Megatron's design. I get his original character concept of a robot that turns into a real looking gun is something that's been rethought over the years, but there is no way you can look at the Michael Bay movie designs and say this is a step up. Another part of my hate for the films stems from Michael Bay's incessant need to do nothing but over-the-top production, anchored by long-winded action scenes and weak as fuck storylines, to where I can basically not be watching whole segments and know I'm not missing important shit. That's depending on how much vodka I've had, however. But to call any of this cinema would be a goddamn joke. They have all the typical bad movie plot structure, pacing, with the addition of visual gimmicky bullshit. And there are too many things about all of these flicks that get under my skin, like the hood talking Autobots in Revenge of the Fallen. I think they were named Who the Fuck Told You This Was a Good Idea? I've seen more than a couple Michael Bay productions, and I'm confident he is the most formulaic of all Hollywood action directors, which is saying something considering action movies have always been a paint-by-numbers factory. But just to make sure I wasn't talking entirely out of my ass, I decided to watch one of his more recent movies, Six Underground. And holy shit cakes, Batman, it's just what I expected. It is the Wikipedia definition of ass hattery. This movie is as shallow as the Real Housewives of Atlanta. It has the most ass backwards storytelling I have ever seen. And it's the cinematic version of having my intellect molested while having the nerve is trying to give you an original concept, but addresses ideas in a manner I would expect from a 25-year-old philosophy major that just started doing meth. I kind of said at the beginning of this rant that I had initial thoughts that maybe my issues with the Transformers movies have less to do with Michael Bay being a one-trick pony-ish hack. But the truth is, Transformers should have never actually stepped into the realm of the live-action movie and should have just stayed as cartoons. And while I do think the movies are an abomination worthy of The Purge, after having to go back and watch and research the franchise as a whole for this video, I have to say I am guilty of championing something just based off of how it made me feel as a kid. And I'm probably not the only person that's ever done this shit. The problem is, all of us whose dicks are in a knot about the current state of Transformers often forget that these originally came out as 26-week ad campaigns. Saturday morning cartoons, especially in the 80s, were predominantly about pushing toy lines on kids and their parents who just wanted little Johnny or Susie to shut the fuck up. And even shows that were based on things that existed before they became sugar cereal whores ended up also getting put on the stroll by Hasbro, Kenner, and Mattel. And this trend had a run pretty much until the modern era of streaming services. A perfect example of this is the 2013 Thundercats show, which was pretty damn good but only lasted one season, and from what I understand, it got canceled due to low toy sales. And while I don't have the energy at this point to do a deep dive to back my next claim, I'm pretty sure that, like the Thundercats show that fizzled, the reason that all the post-2000 Transformers shows that were half decent had such short runs is because they couldn't sell toys. And the easiest way to screw up an IP is to put way more focus on getting every dollar you can haphazardly, as opposed to making stories people will gravitate to, especially if the IP is well established. Looking at you, Marvel Phase 5. And this brings me to my final set of thoughts. At the end of the day, I do recognize I personally have no reason to give anything close to a fuck about Transformers outside of my own nostalgia glasses. And that's one of the shittier parts about getting older. Looking back and realizing that at times you've been just as dumb a cunt as the people you yourself have called a dumb cunt. Because we are all dumb cunts in the eyes of the Lord. Old Man Tyler, out.